Welcome back everyone to another Weather at a Glance video. In today's forecast, we're going to be going over our first preliminary winter forecast for the winter season of 2022, all coming up in just a bit. All right, and on our first slide, we're going to be taking a look at the precipitation forecast for the winter forecast of 2022. And so far, we're going to start off in the northwestern United States. And here you can see we have a little region of slightly below average precipitation. Now, you may be wondering what this is caused by. Normally, these areas do see less precipitation due to the mountain type weather. See the mountains, the precipitation climbs up the western side of the mountains. And when it descends over the eastern side, there is no precipitation left. So this often leads to warmer and drier conditions on the eastern side because compression occurs whenever the air goes back down the mountains and descends. That leads to compression and thus warming. Not only does the compression lead to warming, but there is also drier conditions on the eastern side. Now this year with a jet stream that looks to come over these areas, I do believe that is going to kind of keep things more dry. There will still be precipitation here, but I do believe that this is going to keep things drier for that little region there. Now, I also would like to move to the next region here, this large, slightly below average precipitation region here, and you can see this stretches from the western United States all the way up into the Great Plains. So this is definitely a very wide region here, and you may be wondering, why is this so large? How is this going to occur? Well, I do believe that coming into the La Nina and then into the potential ENSO neutral as we move into February, we will start to see a pattern that we've seen many, many years in the past. So I've looked at historical data, and that's what we usually do here. With seasonal forecasts, we can't really use forecast models because there is no forecast model that stretches out that far, and even if it did, it wouldn't be reliable. So what do? We have to look at historical data. And so far, according to historical data from many, many years ago, we're talking about 100 or so years of recorded data of precipitation anomalies, this is about the area that around between a La Nina and an ENSO neutral switch. These are the areas that usually receive slightly below average precipitation. So that's why I marked these areas. Nothing is set in stone yet. We still have a long way to go before we reach the winter season of 2022. But so far, this is kind of what we're looking at. So please take everything carefully today. Don't take anything too literally because we still have a very long way to go. And this is only just for fun. So make sure that you aren't taking anything too seriously because we still have a very long way to go. And there's still a lot of time to go. I also would like to point out a little region down here in Florida. We also have another slightly below average precipitation region here, and this usually does occur in the winter times. Florida kind of dries out in the winter and then picks back up late winter into early spring. But right now, we are expecting drier conditions so far. With climatological data, we are expecting drier conditions for southern Florida. So keep that in mind as we move into the winter months. All right, moving into our next region here, we're taking a look at the western coastline, and here we have below average precipitation. So this is where you start to notice things. This is where the precipitation falls well below the average, and this is where you start to actually notice a drop in precipitation. In the slightly below average region, you likely will not notice anything. It's just more of micro adjustments. But here, you will likely notice something. Now again, this is going to be far out, so we're not going to take anything too literally today. But so far, according to climatological data, this is where I have pinpointed drier conditions occurring along the western coastline. We're not really going to be looking at too much precipitation coming offshore with the Pacific jet stream because we are expecting that Pacific jet stream to kind of go northward up into Canada and come back down and do its thing across the United States. So I really do not expect much precipitation for the western coastline this winter. We are likely going to continue some drier conditions, and that is likely going to lead to little to no precipitation throughout the winter months this year. All right, now moving on to our next region here, we have another below average region. This is going to be due down through Texas and up into Oklahoma, parts of southeastern Kansas and southwestern Missouri, and then heading back down through western portions of Arkansas and Louisiana. Now, this area is, again, due to climatological data. This is likely going to have drier conditions across portions of the south central United States, and that is due to the jet stream. If we look at how the jet stream is forming already, we see how the jet stream is kind of staying up north. We don't really see too much action going on with the jet stream. We don't really see it coming down too far south, forming those deep troughs that we see in the springtime. We don't really see too much of that going on so far, and I do believe, even with the climatological data not being present, if it were not in my knowledge, I would still say that these areas would likely be below average precipitation this wintertime because we aren't really seeing too much of a tropical surge. Right now, we are seeing rainy conditions around September right now when I'm recording this. We are seeing some precipitation activity right here in eastern Texas. There's a lot of precipitation going on right now, but I do expect that to dry out once again as we move into the winter months. The Gulf of Mexico may look to cool down a little bit. Not by too much, but we are expecting a little bit of less surge in humidity moving up into the United States, Texas-wise, and I do believe that a lot of that precipitation will kind of remain dormant throughout the winter. All right, now moving on to our next region here, we have our large, slightly above average precipitation region. Now, this area is going to be due to a couple factors. Obviously, we'll look at climatological data once more, but I also am expecting a surge of humidity along the eastern half here. So we are looking at a surge of humidity from the Gulf. And you may be wondering, well, why isn't that surge of humidity going up into Texas? It is, but we do have a very empowering cold air dry system. So what that means is we have some large cold fronts coming down from the north, and those are likely going to surge down into Texas, and not only from Texas, but we also have dry air moving in from the west. So we have a lot of dry air impacting these areas. And again, this is just the start of it. I mean, we have, again, the climatological data to support this. So that is the major overriding factor, but I also am giving some insight on how this kind of setup works. So we may be looking at something similar to what I've just shown here. But as we move into the eastern half of the United States, that humidity becomes more extreme, and especially around these times of months, we start to see the warmer, humid conditions develop over Alabama and all that down there, all those states down in the southeastern United States. And I do believe that the cold air will not really intrude too much down into those areas, and we won't see that advancement of western dry air all the way out into the Dixie Alley. So keep that in mind. I am expecting those slightly above average precipitation areas to occur up here in the northeastern United States too as well. We also see that Atlantic humidity, and I do believe that the jet stream is going to carry that moisture up through here. Again, when we see those troughs develop, so let's say a trough develops over here in Illinois, which has kind of been current so far. We've seen that pretty often, that trough develop over in Illinois. That's where the divergence occurs. So we're looking at low pressure systems developing over this region, and those are going to carry on over into the United States. So not only do we have that humidity from the Gulf of Mexico and from the Atlantic, but we also have those low pressure systems developing in that consistent spot over the western Great Lakes region. So I do believe those are going to carry eastward and into that region. So there's a lot going on here. We're not only dealing with climatological historical data, but we're also dealing with a pattern that we've been witnessing for months now. So with that pattern in mind, we can also use that climatological data and put something into picture for you guys to look at. Now, finally, we're going to look at that above average region. This stretches from portions of southern Alabama all the way up into the Smoky Mountains here in Tennessee, and then it goes back down through the western Florida panhandle there. And you can see this isn't really a very large region, but this is enough of a region where you're going to see a lot of those sparky showers. In this region, you could see a lot of thunderstorm showers, I do believe. I think that's what we're going to be dealing with this winter as we carry into the winter. I do believe that we could see a lot of thunderstorm showers. Not too much severe weather yet. We can't really go that far out and start predicting severe weather. But I do believe that we will have a lot of thunderstorm activity in this region specifically. And as we get closer to the winter, I will carry more details on that. All right, now on our next slide, we're going to be taking a look at that temperature forecast for the winter forecast of 2022. And so far, we have a couple of consistent regions here. We have much of the northern United States in a slightly below or below average region there. And then we also have a portion of California, the majority of California, in that slightly above average region over there. And down in Florida, again, we have a southern half kind of cutoff of slightly above average temperatures. So I do want to start off over here in the western United States. We're going to start off with that slightly above average activity over here. And so far, you may be wondering, well, what's causing this little tiny region of slightly above average temperatures? Again, when we look at historical data, we have been seeing a little consistent area. These areas in California have been known through this type of pattern switch to kind of stay above average, just around slightly above average. So you're not really going to notice too much here. I wouldn't say you're really going to notice any temperature change at all, but micro adjustments, if we measure, if we took a measurement of the temperature each day and recorded them from past years, we would likely see a little bit of an increase. That's kind of what we're looking at so far. Now, again, the same thing down here in Florida. We're going to be seeing that same type of setup down in Florida here too. Again, there's going to be a lot of humidity and a lot of warm air and little to no cold air intrusion down here. So we're not really going to see those cold fronts punch that far south. And I do believe that the majority of the winter in Florida is going to be spent warm and humid. So do keep that in mind. We are kind of expecting warmer temperatures to occur there for a couple of reasons. Again, we talked about climatological data, and then again, we also see a lot of that humidity being locked in down here. The jet stream isn't going to come anywhere near here for much of the winter season. I do believe that it's going to stay farther up north, and it's not really going to have any interaction with Florida whatsoever throughout much of the season. Now, we are going to have a little bit of a subtropical advancement. We are going to talk about that subtropical jet stream here. That's going to carry some humidity and moisture as well. So we're also going to see some potential for some thunderstorms down here as well. We're going to see a little bit of wind shear. So as we move closer to the winter months, I will start to put out my severe weather advisements. Maybe in the official winter forecast, we may do a little severe weather kind of map of some sort. I normally don't do that, but maybe we will. We are going to have a good bit of wind shear down here, but it's not really going to be anything too special. So maybe some water spouts, nothing too special for the winter season. Again, we are going to have that subtropical jet stream come through, and I do believe that's going to keep things kind of humid, but dry again. So not enough humidity to get things really going. We're not really going to see anything to lift these type of storm systems up. So basically, obviously, Florida is used to a lot of small convective storms. I'm sure you're going to see a lot of those this winter, but nothing to kind of raise the precipitation level. So basically, we're not really going to see too many QLCS style systems come through, and that's kind of why your precipitation looks to decrease a slight little bit. Again, nothing too major, so you are still going to see rain this winter down there. But the main factor is you're really not going to get any cold front, any real lifting mechanism to come through that's going to cause widespread rainfall across the region. You may have one or two QLCS style systems come through this winter, but I really don't expect too much of widespread precipitation events to happen down in Florida. So that's kind of why it's going to be humid and warm, more than likely, but I don't expect too many widespread precipitation events to occur there. So that's why it's going to remain kind of dry on the drier side. All right, and then our next region, we're going to take a look at that slightly below average region. This is the largest region on the map. This takes up much of the United States, and you can see it goes from portions of Montana all the way down into northern Arkansas and back up through the mid-Atlantic, carrying on into the northeast. So again, this is going to be caused by those cold air intrusions that we were talking about. We are going to see a lot of those large cold fronts come through, and those are going to push down along the course of the jet stream. And I do believe the main Arctic blasts, the main big cold air punches are going to come down through this region here. That's why we have that below average region. We'll get into that in just a minute. But as you can see, a lot of these regions, according to climatological data, we are expecting slightly below average temperatures here. But for the majority of it, I do believe that's really going to stay consistent. It's going to stay around average. I do believe that we could see a little bit of a drop, so it's not going to be anything too noticeable. But for these regions, you can expect just mainly your normal temperatures, but slightly below at times. So nothing too noticeable here. You're not going to notice it. You're not going to go outside and feel, hey, it's way colder than it used to be. But I do believe that it will stay slightly below the benchmark. Now, moving on to our final region here, the below average region. This is where the big cold comes in, and you guys are used to this now. For the past couple years we've been in La Nina, we have seen this type of event. So this is pretty much due to the La Nina carrying on throughout much of the winter, possibly even through the majority of the winter. We do see the chance for us to go neutral towards the end of the winter. More on that in our next forecast, but right now, we are just taking things cautious. We're going to kind of stick with the majority of the forecast being La Nina, and this is kind of typical. So kind of with ENSO neutral and La Nina, we kind of see this giant region of below average temperatures. And again, this is where you're going to start to feel those temperatures. Now, the last couple of years have been below too, so you can't really compare this year, say this year's going to be below average than what last year was. It's going to be similar to the past couple years, 2020, 2021, maybe even 2019. We can look back to there. So we're going to see a lot of colder conditions a lot throughout the north. You've already been experiencing that. Those 60s, maybe even down into the 50s have been kind of intruding so far, kind of preparing to say, hey, let's get ready for winter. It's coming soon. So keep that in mind. it definitely is starting to get a little bit chillier up there, starting to feel those fall temperatures start to move in, and that's kind of a sign that those colder temperatures will remain throughout the winter. We are expecting those sometimes even bitter cold temperatures to move through, but we're not really going to get too much into that in this forecast. We're just going to let you know that it likely is going to be below average again. All right, now in the final slide of our forecast, this kind of looks similar to both forecasts. You may be saying, well, this looks like a temperature forecast and this looks like a precipitation forecast. Well, what is it? Well, this is going to be our snowfall anomaly forecast. So this is our forecast map to let you know if you're going to be having some above average snowfall or below average. Let's go ahead and take a look at our first region in the western United States. And so far, we're going to be looking over here in the Sierra Nevada mountains and stretching up into the mountains in Oregon. So as you can see, this goes from Oregon all the way down through much of California. Now, again, this is going to be due to historical data that we're mainly looking at, those slightly below average precipitation anomalies that kind of occur throughout much of the western United States that I marked here. That is the main reason why I'm saying there's going to be slightly below average snowfall. If you have less precipitation in the wintertime, that's going to lead to less snowfall because that's your precipitation type, especially in the mountains. So obviously I didn't mark all of California in a slightly below average snowfall because much of California does never see snowfall. So for right now, we're just going to keep it in the mountains. That's all it's going to be, obviously, because snowfall does not occur rarely ever down by San Francisco. So we're just going to keep that. All of those areas are likely going to stay average, never expecting any snowfall really there. But for the mountain parts, I do believe you guys are going to see a little bit of a less snowfall than you would in other winters. So let's say you usually see, those areas do get a lot of snowfall up in those mountains, sometimes up into the 100s, 200-inch range. And I do believe this year you could see slightly below that. So again, nothing too extreme. We're not talking about you're only really going to see 50 inches of snowfall this season. Again, that would be very bold of me to say even this far out. We're not predicting snowfall totals here. We're just going to say that it's likely going to be slightly below average for the Sierra Nevada mountains so far with the data that we've looked at. Now moving on to our next region here. This is a very widespread region. This goes up through parts of the western Great Lakes all the way down into the Great Plains. Now, again, this is going to correspond with that region that we drew of slightly below average precipitation. Now, the reason we didn't draw those areas for down here into the southwestern United States is because a lot of those areas do not see snowfall. Sure, we could count some of those mountains that we see there that usually get snowfall up in northern New Mexico, maybe even into northern Arizona, but we really aren't focusing on those areas. These areas consistently see snowfall throughout the winter. We're talking about northern Texas up into Iowa. This area usually does see a good bit of snowfall. Now, this area is likely going to see slightly below average conditions. We're not really expecting a major drop in snowfall, but I do believe that some slightly less snowfall may occur this winter for this region due to the lack of precipitation forecasted. All right, now moving on to our next region, we're going to look up here in the mountainous regions of Montana all the way down into Wyoming. And here, this is going to be slightly above average snowfall. So again, nothing too noticeable, but I am expecting with that region of slightly above average precipitation, we are also going to see a corresponding region of slightly above average snowfall. So again, nothing too noticeable. We're not talking about anything maybe about like 50 plus inches than you normally would get. We're just talking around maybe a couple inches more extra or so. So nothing too noticeable, but if you guys love snow up there, that's kind of what you're looking for this season. So keep that in mind. Now, moving on to our final region, we're taking a look at that slightly above average snowfall region. Now, this corresponds with that slightly above average precipitation region that we were talking about earlier that stretches up into these portions of the northeastern United States here. And this is likely not going to be anything too noticeable. Again, we're only talking about maybe a couple inches extra, and that is just a potential as of now. So don't take that too seriously. But again, we are expecting some slightly above average conditions and snowfall there. Again, you guys usually see plenty of snowfall each season, especially throughout the La Nina years. Definitely big snowfall events that we've seen in the past couple years. So again, nothing too noticeable in change, but I do believe to the anomaly part of it, we may see a couple inches extra this season. I want to thank you all so much for watching today's forecast. I would ask you consider subscribing for more U.S. forecasts free of charge, and I would ask that you consider following the Weather at a Glance official Facebook page for more inside information and complimentary personal forecasts when you message me on my Facebook page. Again, I want to thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next video.